All right, some travel plans may be up in the air this weekend for Canadians in the wake of a labor war at WestJet. Around 1,800 WestJet and Swoop pilots issued a strike notice on Monday, and the company responded with a threat to lock them out. The work stoppage could happen as early as Friday. Transport Minister Omar Al-Ghabra had this to say about ongoing talks.
What we want to say and do is encourage both parties to find a deal. I do not want to put my finger on the scale. I do not want to preempt the discussions.
Alexis von Hoensbroech is the CEO of WestJet. He joins me now. Sir, thank you for your time today. I wonder if we could start with where are negotiations right now? Is there any chance of an agreement before these deadlines?
Yeah, so as you can see, I'm in a hotel room, which is the hotel close to Toronto, where we are currently all together in bargaining. We are working basically around the clock to come up with a deal because no one wants labor disruption. And we want to protect the guest travel over the May long weekend, but there are limits to what we can do, and that's why we are here to negotiate.
So you say you're working around the clock. I saw you say earlier this week that what the union is asking for is unreasonable. Have you made any progress whatsoever with the strike and lockout deadlines looming?
Well, the deadlines are what they are, but the atmosphere at the talks, at the bargaining table is actually constructive, so that's good. However, it is always positional, and the gap is still substantial. So I do sincerely hope that we can bridge it. We have all hands on deck. We have the entire team here. I'm here. The union representatives are all here. The federal conciliators are here. The Minister of Labor was here today. So everyone is trying to get this to a deal, and I sincerely hope we can make it work.
So the union says the big issues on the table are pay, scheduling, and job security, that there's been a massive turnover of pilots within your organization broadly. What are you offering the pilots? Where is that gap right now?
Okay, let me first do some myth busting. So within the bargaining unit, which is basically WestJet mainline, and then of course also Swoop, but at WestJet mainline, we have seen some resignations, but not at a very high level. We actually hired 3 times more pilots into WestJet mainline than we have seen resigning, so they were pretty stable. The majority of the resignations that we are seeing is actually with our regional subsidiary, WestJet Encore. That's where regional pilots are leaving, by the way, similar to many other regional airlines. And this is very unfortunate, but this is not part of the current bargaining. So that's, I think, just important to know. So around the 3 themes that the union has been mentioning, we are addressing all 3 of them. So we have made very, I think, reasonable and also generous proposals around job security, around scheduling, and around wages. Now, while some of this is being seen positive by the union, especially on wages, we are actually still substantially apart. But it's all one package, so you can't cherry pick one part, and so it all interacts with each other. So either we find agreement on everything or on nothing. That's unfortunately the reality we are in.
Right. You said earlier that you don't want to see travel disruption. I just wonder then why you chose to issue a lockout notice. I mean, it's one thing for the union to set a strike deadline. That's what they do. But if the company does not want travel disruption, why issue a lockout?
Well, the union threw the first stone by issuing a strike notice, and we have to respond to this with a lockout, because otherwise we may lose control over our network, our crews, and our aircraft. So the union would just say we are going on strike as of a certain deadline, but they are not obliged to tell us when exactly and where and which part of the network they go on strike. So this could then end up in aircraft being stranded somewhere on an island in the Caribbean or in Mexico or wherever, where we have no maintenance and so on. So it actually becomes a safety issue. So therefore, we need to make sure that we are in control and we get all aircraft and all crew home prior to a deadline starting. And the only way to get control over this is actually issuing a lockout, because then we exactly know what's happening. We know at what time the labor action is starting, and so we can wind down the network in an ordered way and have control over the aircraft and the crews and make sure that everything is being properly managed. And a restart after labor action is actually possible, and we don't have to run around and look where our aircraft are sitting.
Okay, so we've got the long weekend coming up where a lot of people will be traveling, and after that we have the summer travel season. So what if Friday comes around and there is no deal? What are you offering your passengers?
So first of all, we are trying to come up with a deal. Let me just re-emphasize that. And I think everyone is having all hands on deck to get this done. Now, we can't foresee the future. We don't know whether we can actually come up with a deal. And if in the end, there will be labor action. The disruption to the network will be substantial, and this would unfortunately cause lots of guest travel to be disrupted. And we are sincerely sorry for our guests that they are now being caught in the middle of a totally unnecessary conflict. So what we are doing is we are offering flexible change and cancel rules. So our guests can cancel or change their flights without any fees. We refund flights, of course, so we will do whatever we can, but we have to face the fact that not all guests will then make it to their destination, because we will only be able to sustain a fraction of our normal network. And other airlines are probably pretty well booked, so alternative options are also scarce. My recommendation to guests is hope for the best, but plan for the worst. So it's probably a prudent thing to do, to think about alternative travel options at this point in time.
This comes at a time after a rough holiday travel season over the Christmas holidays, lots of delays in airports, canceled flights, not just your airline, but airlines across the country. I mean, how do you anticipate the public would react, whether it's a strike or whether it's a lockout, if there's yet another massive disruption in air travel in this country?
This would be very, very unfortunate and would create massive economic damage, and would create another frustration with air passengers. And that's why we don't want anything like this to happen. And that's why it's so important that we come together. But it requires that both sides are acting reasonably and are not demanding things that the other side cannot afford. And there are limits to what we can afford. Let's not forget, we went through 3 years of a devastating pandemic that left deep scars on our balance sheet. And there are just things that we can't afford. And we value the work of our pilots. Our pilots are fantastic. They're among the best pilots of the world. So we truly value them. And therefore we are also ready to give them a substantial double-digit increase, which, by the way, is more than other unions went on strike for. So this is, I think every other union would be really happy about what we're offering.
Okay.
But it doesn't seem to be enough. Sorry.
Okay, no, something happened there. I don't know what it was, but just as a final point, because we need to let you go. Just if you say talks are constructive, but the gap is still large, how confident are you that you can have this resolved by the Friday lockout and strike deadlines?
So I truly believe there's a magic of the last 48 hours, and there's a lot of things are possible. So I think there's I'm cautiously optimistic that we can find a conclusion. But I also know the downside risk that actually everything could fall apart, and then we could see massive labor action. So I really hope that we will not go there, and we will do whatever we can and what is reasonable to come up with a deal.
Okay. WestJet CEO Alexis von Hoensbroech, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, we're going to bring in the other side of these labor talks. Captain Bernard Lewell joins me now. He is the chair of the WestJet Airline Pilots Association Master Executive Council. Mr. Lewell, thank you so much for joining me.
Good to be here. Thank you.
So the CEO of WestJet describes the talks as constructive, but says there is a large gap. What is your perspective on where things are right now?
I think that's fairly accurate. Look, we've been negotiating since September of 2022. It's been almost 8.5 months now. We've gone through the full conciliation process. We've had a strike authorization ballot. We've gotten into the cooling off period. We're at the cooling off period now. During that entire time, we never saw Alexis at the table until yesterday. I don't know. He said this was an unnecessary conflict. I totally agree with him. I do think, though, it would be more prudent for him to take this a little more seriously a little earlier in the game.
So he's there now, though. Do you think he's coming to the table himself to close this deal, or is he there to draw a hard line with you and your fellow pilots?
Well, it feels to us that he's drawing a hard line between the company and the pilots. I hope that's just posturing for the last 24 hours. But right now, it seems like he's just here to draw the hard line.
He says there's a double-digit wage increase on the table. Is that accurate, and is that close to what you're looking for in this particular part of the package?
I was surprised to hear that, so I'm excited to see this pass that he's going to pass over to us. Right now, in the first year, we are not seeing a double-digit increase, and if that is what he's saying it is, I look forward to seeing it. I do have to address his comment, though, about pilots leaving and pilots being fired.
Yep.
I just got the latest data. April to April, we had 130 Swoop and WestJet pilots leave, and they hired 121 pilots to Swoop and WestJet. So I'm not sure where he gets this 3 times as many hires as pilots quitting. It's not accurate. And really what we're at the table to do is to get a contract so that those pilots stop leaving and the experienced ones stop leaving and we can hire new ones off the street. That's what we want a good contract for.
Well, I guess the numbers can change depending on what timeframes you use for the parameters, right? I mean, depending on where your start and end date is. But just to circle back to the wage increase, do you take what Mr. van Hoensbroech said about a double-digit wage increase as in year one or over the life of the collective agreement? I mean, how do you understand that? And has that actually been put on the table to you, or is this the first you've heard of it?
I would say that year one, we're looking for a double digit. We've been well below market for many years now. We need to have a significant increase in year one. So over the course of 4 or 5 years, it will be double digit, but the year one actually does have to be double digit. And again, I'll bring it back to the North American market. We are about 45% underpaid according to that marketplace. We're not saying that the gap has to close. We are saying it has to narrow and stop growing.
So you've issued a strike deadline, and they've responded with a lockout, and you heard the explanation there, so they can sort of take control of where the planes are at any particular point if you get to a labor stop. But you know the frustration passengers are having in this country with air travel over the past little while, certainly at holiday season, the peak delays, whether it's a frozen conveyor belt at an airport or weather delays or just flight problems. How prepared are you for a public backlash if you have to ground the fleet because either you guys go on strike or they lock you out?
I need to reiterate, the last thing my pilots want to do is go on strike. We're here to fly passengers to the destinations that they bought tickets for. That's our primary goal. But we need this added pressure on the company to get them to move the final distance. And I'm sure they can do that if they put their heart and mind to it. But again, the last thing we want to do is prevent passengers from getting where they need to be.
Mr. van Hoensbroech said that the pandemic left deep scars on their balance sheets, and there's limits to how much they can give you, even though you talk about the market gap between what WestJet pilots make in Canada and what your contemporaries make in the United States. Is he being legitimate there? Do you think that there are challenges that WestJet in particular faces that stops them from maybe giving you the full size of the compensation and changes you're looking for?
There certainly were challenges during COVID. We all experienced them. Of my pilot group, about 50% were furloughed. Of the ones that remained here, they took up to 70% pay cuts. So we have felt the effects of COVID right across the industry, and we don't minimalize it at all. But going forward, we feel that we're offering a compensation package to the pilots and to the company that will be something that the company can afford, as well as keep pilots here, which I think Alexis in other interviews has touted his growth strategy. We agree. We want WestJet to grow. It needs to grow for the health of the company. And yet it won't if we keep losing pilots to the extent we've been losing them.
Well, you have this situation now where the deadline's 48 hours away, and Mr. van Hoensbroech talked about how he believes in the magic of the last 48 hours. He is, as you say, personally at the table. How confident are you, given where things are and the gap that exists, that there can be a deal by Friday and there are no flight disruptions for Canadians before the long weekend?
I certainly hope there can be a deal by Friday. Again, the last thing I want is my 1,800 pilots walking a picket line and then the associated layoffs of other employees in the WestJet group of companies, as well as the tens of thousands of passengers that are stranded. So it weighs heavily on all our minds. We do want a deal, but we need a deal that will be good for the company and for the pilots, that will keep the pilots here, that we need to grow this company.
There's a difference between hope and optimism. Are you hopeful or are you optimistic? I mean, do you see this? How would you handicap the chances of this getting done?
That's a very difficult question. The company needs to move, and they need to move significantly. They need to start taking these talks seriously.
Okay. Captain Bernard Lewell of the WestJet Airline Pilots Association, thank you so much for your time today, and good luck with the talks.
Thank you.